Greetings, everybody. It's Jim. I am so glad to be doing this video today because anybody who knows me knows I love spaceship combat games without a shadow of a doubt, whether it be fighter combat, capital ships, or even taking over the entire galaxy in a strategic sense, in a strategic war game. I am all down for it. Okay. And one of my first instances of a great spaceship combat game came to me in the Navy, and I was introduced to Starfleet Battles. All right, not only was it a great game, it had the intellectual property of Star Trek attached to it. I was in like Flint. I was just stuck in. I mean, I wouldn't let go. Matter of fact, I remember coming home from a day of playing the game, and I was just so pumped about how great the game was that I got on the phone. This was before cell phones, so it was calling long distance, which costs a good bit of money, especially for any length of time. And I called Texas up and got a hold of Stephen V. Cole himself, the man himself, and I just talked. I don't even remember what I said. I do remember what he said back, though. He was kind of flabbergasted, and he was like, well, we aim to please. That was it. And decades later, Stephen V. Cole would actually streamline the game a little bit because, it's a longer game, and he streamlined it with Federation Commander. Now, when I heard this, because I was already playing Silent Death from Iron Crown Enterprise, it was one of my favorite spaceship combat games of all time, I was really appreciating how fast games were. And I kind of got out of Starfleet Battles because of the length that you did have to put into playing the game with only maybe two, three ships aside. But then Federation Commander came out, streamlined all that, and man, guess what I did? I was stuck in and I was loving it. And guess who I contacted? Yes, that's right. I contacted Stephen V. Cole yet again. And the next thing you know, I'm play testing for Federation Commander War and Peace along with my buddy Keith Reed, and we were going with the Andromedans. And I was very happy about that because the rest of the races kind of all seem interchangeable with their weapons. They seem very similar. However, the Andromedans, they're totally different with their PA panels and everything. I actually felt that they were alien, so I was really glad if I was going to get into a supplement, it was going to be that one. But what I want to address to you right now is what's listed under the title Starfleet Battles. Task Force Games number 4. Now, what's that mean? Of course, that means there's 3 games previous to this, which is understandable. They are, after all, a game company. But the interesting thing here is one of those games was also a spaceship combat game. It was also written by Stephen V. Cole, and I have totally ignored it all my life. I even knew of its existence because obviously I played Starfleet Battles, but I didn't give it a second chance or even a first chance for that matter. Why? Mainly because I'm thinking to myself, well, what could possibly top Starfleet Battles? What could possibly top the intellectual property of Star Trek? Right? And so I didn't even think about it. I said, why do they promote this game? Shouldn't they just push everybody into Starfleet Battles? Well, there's a lot of good reasons, and we're going to be going over them today. So today, I'm going to be giving you my review of Starfire from Task Force Games, written by Stephen V. Cole. Now, I was kind of surprised to find that Starfire actually had such a dedicated fan base, and still has 2 editions of the latest version out right now. And I did say 2 different editions of the same edition. Does that even make sense? I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but it's pretty interesting. And it talks about where the fan base actually comes from. Okay, now I'm going to concentrate on the pocket versions throughout all this because that's what I got into. Of course, as you know, I like the mini game versions of anything. But also, I had to wait on a while before I started getting these because these were all $50 to $100 a shot on eBay. And I'm like, I'm just going to be patient, wait to get a good trade or find one somewhere somehow. And I was patient and it paid off. But had I had known the game was so good, I might have been tempted to crack open my wallet for that amount. But definitely Starfire, the first book is all about the ship combat rules and the construction rules, making up your own ships and such. Starfire 2 is the combat rules again, but this time with strike fighter rules. And from 2nd edition on, they call this portion Strike Fighter. Okay, but there's no ship construction rules. So if you just wanted a combat game by itself, Starfire 2 would be the way to go. But if you wanted some ship construction rules, you'll need Starfire 1. Now, Starfire 3. is where the rabbit hole goes for this dedicated fan base. This is the real start of it, because this is where this is all about the empire building. This is all about creating your own galaxy to fight over, okay? And it is deep. Now, it's a small book, just like the other ones, but let me tell you, from this small book, it grows into the latest editions where it's 300 pages plus, and I kid you not about that. Okay, so it's pretty wild. So let's go through the editions right quick here. So here's second edition Starfire, where they actually combine Starfighter and Starfire 1 and Starfire 2, otherwise known as Strike Fighter, and they put them all in one box, and then they keep the empire building rules in another book altogether. And then you have third edition, which is the same thing. They just pretty it up some more, and they put the first and second book in a box, and they keep the empire building in another book. Now, when Starfire Design Studios branched off into their own company, this is where they all put everything into one box, because this is where the fan base was really going. It was the dedicated people who really wanted to create empires, and that's what they wanted. That's what it's basically all about. However, I do have some caveats about this, because I'm thinking to myself, as a marketer, you really want to get people in the door with that Starfire game because it's so simple. But when you add the Empire rules, it's thick and it's deep and it's intimidating to anybody else. So while you might be catering to your own base, you're really going to have a hard time having that base grow. And I think that's probably been true for a while. But now, to make things even more interesting, the latest edition has two different versions of it. You have Ultra Starfire and you have Cosmic Starfire. Ultra Starfire they're both the same thing as far as it's about the galactic map, right? The difference is about how fair it is. Ultra Starfire is the tournament version of it. Everything's fair, everything's sectioned out, and it's an equal race, and the best man wins, right? And so that's what that's about. And then Cosmic Starfire is more of the narrative form of the game. But basically, and you'll get this out of playing Starfire 3 from the pocket versions, they're actually, when there's things that are, and they happen and they're unfair, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it creates its own narrative, its own story about what the universe is like. It's not about winning, really. While Ultra Starfire is definitely all about winning. It's your typical 4X game, right? Civilization in space. But Cosmic Starfire is kind of more of the old school role-playing game where it's like, hey, let's just make all this stuff up and just see where everything goes. Let's see what happens to this system over here, and what happens when they meet with them and stuff. And you're more of a simulationist aspect of it. But again, both of them 300 pages plus long. And what does it entail? Well, I'll get into that later. But it is definitely detailed, and it does add some pretty cool things. But again, because it is all combined with the main rules, you can get the main rules downloaded for free, but because it seems like, you have to have that, and with one of these products, it just seems like it's disjointed a little bit, almost like it's just too overwhelming for people to really dive into. That would be my only criticism, but this is definitely what has been keeping the fan base alive. This is what they want at the same time. So I'm going to definitely get into that. So right now, why don't we just start, though, with talking about the Starfire combat rules. So let's talk a little bit about what makes Starfire shine. Okay, what is the key element that really makes it stand out amongst everything else? And that is its damage track. And I call it a damage track because out of all the iterations of, spaceship combat games, the damage track is what it really resembles the most. Let's take a look at some of the games here and their ways of taking damage. Here's Starfleet Battles. Now, this can be intimidating, of course, to anybody who looks at it. It has a reputation for being intimidating, and their SSDs, or ship system displays, really don't help in a way. But the thing is, this is actually quite efficient. Everything on the left-hand side is just charts, to reference as you're playing. Okay, it's not that bad. It makes it so you don't have to flip through a book or look at another chart. But really, The real main part of the SSD is on the right hand side where the ship is. You could see all the shields surrounding the ship. And of course, as you look into the ship itself, you see all the damage that it can take, all the specialized internal components of the ship. And you may see the DNA of Battletech in this, or this in Battletech, I should say. I wonder how much Battletech was influenced by Starfleet battles because of this idea. Okay, so as ships take damage on any one side, they start marking off boxes from left to right, up to down, and then when that shield's gone, then all of a sudden you go into the internal track. It's simple enough. And then you have a Federation Commander, its sister game, which isn't really too much different as far as the ship design sheets go. It works on the same premise. Okay. Then you have my game, Ascension of the Galaxy, which you can get with the link down below and take a look at that. But it's a mix between Silent Death and Federation Commander, and you will definitely see influences of both of those games in Ascension of the Galaxy. But let's take a look at Silent Death here. Let's get rid of these real quick. And there's Silent Death right here. Now, you may be saying, if you're a Silent Death aficionado, you may say, hey, Jim, that's not what Silent Death looks like. This is what Silent Death looks like. Hey, what's going on here? Well, the thing is, I'm going to release these during my Silent Death video, which I plan on doing sometime soon, because, I love the game so much. I actually redid all the ships that fit on index cards. Okay, so, normally they have a sheet of paper too, but this makes it so I condense everything down to its key components, and I think I did a really good job of it. Makes it a lot easier to play on the table and stuff. Instead of shuffling through papers, now you only have to shuffle through maybe a few index cards. So be looking forward to that. But anyway, the damage track, and the reason why I call this a damage track is because it's only one thing you have to really track. On the bottom left-hand side, again, just like the ships on the SSDs, you go from left to right, up to down. But the thing is, as you mark off boxes, sooner or later you'll mark off a box with something in it, and that means you hit a system. So basically, on the second hit of the Deathwind here, you have the 4 with a diamond around it. That means it's the ship shields, and when you knock off the 4, it actually turns into the next available diamond, which is a 3, as you can see down the line. So basically, the shields get knocked down. When you hit a T, that means a torpedo's gone, a W, a weapon's gone, an asterisk means it's a critical hit, and so on and so on. Okay, so that's Silent Death. So with that in mind, let's take a look at one of the first damage tracks in space gaming history, and that is Starfire, and it looks like this. Bam! Simple. This is one ship from start to finish. Everything from ship systems. You could see how fast it moves, how well it turns, all that just on one little line. Now, mind you, these get a little bit more complicated as you get into the game. I can definitely show you some that are like not simple at all, actually, but the basic main idea of the game is just this. So let's explain what this this damage track is all about. So let's talk about the first 2 numbers that we see here. Not the first 2, the first number and the last number in parentheses, because they're really not part of the damage track. When you start crossing off, you actually start with the S on the left-hand side, okay? But the left-hand number is the turn ratio. Basically, it's the number of spaces you have to go forward before you can turn again. Obviously, big lumbering ships have a higher turn radius than others, or turn ratio. And then the last number is just the number of movement points the ship has. All right, so five movement points. Ships in Starfire go up to 6, and that's maximum. Okay, now everything else in the middle is where the damage track actually is, and you cross off things again from left to right. And the thing is, every letter is its own system. So S stands for shields, as you can imagine, that's why it's in the front of the ship. A stands for armor, of course, that would be next. And the difference between shields and armor is actually the same. It's just that certain weapons go through shields, certain weapons go through armor, and of course, shields. I think there's an optional rule that you can have shields regenerate. If they don't get hit. Armor always has to get repaired. So they're 2 different things to a point. but sometimes in some battles they don't mean anything different at all. But you just start crossing them off left to right, and then you have other systems, like your point defense, your guns, your lasers, and stuff, and it's all considered a letter. I is inertia drives, so you notice that all the eyes, with the exception of maybe one, are in the back. So the further back everything is, the more protected it is, and much like Starfleet battles and every other game that I think Task Force Games has made, which is a big influence, is having the drives all the way in the back, so they're always protected. So you could take damage, but you can think later on, okay, the ship's really dead in the water, let's escape. And they're not dead, because in this game, ship damage is usually not like more than two at a time, unless you're really close to each other. All right, so you can get away. There's enough time, and that's pretty much a key element to a lot of scenarios. When is the right time to skedaddle? And you could lay chase after these guys and you go into pursuit. But in this game, when you got other guys firing at you, you want to take care of them. You generally, unless it's scenario based, don't want to actually go off against a damaged ship once it disengages from battle. But that is the basic idea of the damage tracks in Starfire, and it makes it so elegant. All the ships, you can have so many ships on just one little index card. It's just absolutely beautiful. Now, one thing that really stood out to me for Starfire, other than the damage track, was its complete lack of fire arcs. I mean, you play any other game in the world there, basically Federation Commander, Starfleet Battles, Silent Death, Sensitive to the Galaxy, all of them have different arcs for all their weapons. Some of them are a tight beam, which are really powerful. Some of them spread out more, etc., etc. But in Starfire, and I imagine this is just to keep it simple, which makes sense for a micro game, is there's only two arcs, and it depends on what kind of ship you have. For fighters, it's on the bottom left there. It's just right in front. That shouldn't be a surprise. They're very maneuverable, so that's really probably not much of a problem. But the big thing is on the top there, that is all capital ships have that arc on the top. As long as it's not behind you, you can fire at it. It doesn't matter what kind of weapons you have, the number of different weapons you have, the range, the damage, the hit ratio. All of them can fire at anybody as long as they're not behind you. Now, one thing that I found with games like this, especially this one, is it's actually easier to get out of somebody's arc when you're like 10 hexes out. Because if you're really close, and it's tempting because you want to get that extra damage. Some weapons do more damage when you're closer. But all the other ship has to do is just go tink and turn a little bit. And especially with these arcs being so wide, and you're back in arc. Okay, it doesn't really matter. So I actually found, now mind you, I only played some of the introduction scenarios, but I found myself, even when I got to some of the later ones, no matter how close we got or we started doing maneuvers, I was never out of arc, and it really didn't almost matter. I was actually more concerned about staying in a certain range to get a certain amount of damage more than anything else. Let me know in the comments down below, for you Starfire aficionados, how much arcs really meant to your game, and if so, how did you implement them? I'd like to know that. So let's go through a little scenario here that I played. And I like what Starfire did is that they added something every scenario. It'll give you a little bit more of an aha moment. They won't spell it out for you, but there's some kind of tactic that you have to learn, either the easy way or the hard way. And I like that about this. So, and this one came down to point defense. Okay. So anyway, this is a basic base attack. The Terrans are coming in on the right-hand side through the warp point on the far right, that little black cross there, a black counter with a cross on it, and they're on the upper right. They're already maneuvering out of the warp point, and the K-Knight player is defending their base. The base is the white piece there. There's a planet on the upper left just for flavor, and the K-Knight forces are in red. Now, this is at the end of turn one, and when you can already see the K-Knight forces are already getting hit. The middle escort took a lot of damage, and it's almost out of the game already. It only has one weapon left and a couple of points of drive. The thing is about this game, again, the ranges are up to 15 or more for missiles, and it only takes a 9 or less to hit. So if you don't have point defense, you're getting hit, and that's what's happening here. And mind you, the destroyer on the Terrans, they got a little luckier, and they didn't get hit as bad. So it's going on to turn two, and as you can see, the K-Knight player, they get a little closer, and not that it matters for range and stuff like that, because I think it's like from 5 to 15, it's a 9 to hit either way. It doesn't change for the range. So getting closer doesn't really matter in this case. But the K-9 player has got two ships almost toast now. One of them's already disengaging, and this is victory point based. So yeah, the Terran's objective is to take out that base, which I keep them true to in the scenario. But they could choose to just go after the stragglers and finish them off and get victory points that way. Well, that's the whole point. You're trying to disengage so you don't lose more victory points. And I like those kind of scenarios. So we're getting a little closer here now. This they get a little closer, and on turn 3 here, already almost all the Canite ships are destroyed. The Terran ship is pretty much the destroyer is pretty much almost gone. Now they're working on the frigate a little bit. And then turn forward. Now, like I said, the Terrans are going after that base. I kept them true to the mission. They could have gone after the Canite stragglers, there are plenty, but they want that base. So they're going after it. They're giving up their back, but that's okay. They're not firing behind them. They're firing in front anyway. But this is where we learn about point defense. Okay. Like I said, those missiles are pretty effective. However, against point defense, it is massively ineffective. So when you shoot a missile at a ship with point defense, the target ship rolls a d6. It only gets through on a 6, and that's it. Okay. Now, if you want a more better chance to get through, if a ship fires more than one missile at it, then it gets a little easier every die roll. So the first missile that's attacking it is a 6 to get through. Then the next missile will get through on a 5 or 6, and so on and so on. Mind you, that is not cumulative for other ships that fire missiles at that target. Okay. If a new ship fires missiles at that target, the process starts over at only getting through on a 6. So point defense, very effective. So I was finding out that, as things got closer, it was better actually to shoot guns than missiles. Now, mind you, you would think, oh, you don't have a choice between missiles and guns. I mean, and that's true for a lot of ships. But some ships actually have a kind of a multi rack kind of thing where you can choose whether that's going to be a missile that turn or a gun that turn. So that's actually quite interesting. So some ships have things that are just set in stone. It's a missile, it's a gun. Others have a choice, and that makes them a little bit more powerful. But anyway, we're going up here, and I'm learning the hard way about point defense and how nasty it is. And now the Terran player is starting to get nailed. I mean, they got the one frigate's only one left, and they're doing some damage to that base. They're almost taking it out, but by the time they make their pass, they've got nothing left. The Terrans are just done. They surrender. They have no weapons left whatsoever. It's over. And one thing you also notice, though, that the Canite player, as much as they can fire, if the Terrans had any weapons at all, they could still fire at the Canites. They turned, and they can still get in fire arc because it's so wide. Again, let me know in the comments about your tactics about about the arcs. Did they matter in Starfire or didn't they? All right, so let's take a look at what makes the fan base of Starfire so deep, and that is its empire building. Okay, we're going to go through the pocket box version of Empires, which is only 23 pages long, but yet still has a lot of detail. And then we're going to go through, just leafing through it, the 429-page behemoth of Solar Starfire. My goodness, how can you deny that this is what the fan base wants? Now, before we go on, I do want to mention 2 combat things that they actually streamlined from 3rd edition on, I do believe, and they are pretty good, that I would implement even if you were playing the regular Starfire. One, they changed it to hit charts to go from 2d6 to 1d10. So if you have a ship, you could just roll multiple d10s and figure it all out instead of rolling the dice over and over. It really streamlines combat a lot. You can even color code the dice for missiles and guns. It really is a good idea. Plus, they took care of the half hits. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but half hits, sometimes when you're in range or something, some weapons will only do half a point of damage, which just means that system that has half a point of damage, if it takes another half point of damage, then it will be destroyed. Now, if it takes a full point of damage, it does not carry over to the next system. So I think by 3rd edition, they were like, that's a little bit fiddly. It rarely comes into play that a half point really mattered, so they just eliminated it altogether. I kind of agree with that, which is kind of funny how they would streamline things because they found them to be fiddly and they wanted them to go faster, but yet they turned Starfire empires into the behemoth that it is with 429 pages. It's different, but so they definitely know what the combat system they wanted to streamline, the empires they wanted to expand on. So let's take a look at the galactic chart here real quick. This is the sample galactic chart in empires. You can, of course, change the dots wherever it is. Each dot is its system. And the idea is the warp points that you end up building as the game progresses change from, they change from whatever game you're playing because it happens randomly. So no two will ever be the same, even if you use the same chart. Okay, but you can always, if you wanted to, change the chart up a little bit. It's not going to matter too much, but they just give you this to start with. So in empires, so let's take a look at what they talk about here. What they generally do is when it comes to system generations, the location, how many warp points each system has, the warp point determinations. Just kind of going through this right here. The planetary population, the atmosphere determination. They try to tell you what kind of militaristic value they have. Are they very peaceful, or will they stand up in rebellion if you don't leave enough of a force behind? Very interesting things there. And atmosphere is a big thing because, of course, if they don't have a really breathable atmosphere, you can probably use their ships and use them as a force, but they actually are going to be more expensive to maintain for your empire because they need special things. And you can't interact the same ships together either. They talk about ground bases and alliances, capturing ships, and of course, like I said, rebellions. You could totally wipe them out if you're sick of a population, just total genocide. They have a chart for hostile non-player reactions, research and development, because there is a tech level tier in the game, which really works, and I actually quite like it. Usually, there are, and that makes sense for empire building that there are different tech levels. Because, like, if you remember Star Trek, everybody was almost at the same tech level to a point, which is kind of mind scratching. There, it's like they didn't. I wonder how that worked out. Did they just end up that way because of once they met each other, or because when you meet a race for the first time, I imagine it'd be more like Babylon 5, where you've got a tech level 1, you got a tech level 7 at the same time. Which can totally get wiped out. They do have a few new ship systems, capital ship missiles, which are a little bit stronger, minefields in the game. But here's let me see here. There it is, the tech level chart right here. So on tech level 1, you'll have your basic guns, missiles, lasers, shields, and such. But then you get the tech level 2, and they add multiplex tracking where you can attack more than one ship at a time, which is actually quite a nice system because in the game, again, you only have weapons that do 1 or 2 points of damage. But if you wipe out the last weapon on a ship, you don't want to fire at it again because it's already dead in the water. Now you can fire at a new ship. That actually saves you a couple of shots in the game. Then to get into tractor beams, data links, where you can actually fire at the same target for the same distance. It takes the range from one ship, and it says everybody else can fire at it from that distance. It's kind of like in my game, Ascension of the Galaxy, the Sherlock system, which I use in Alpha Mecha as well. Just the same idea. That's what I call the Sherlock system. Then in Tech Level 4, they get the shearing planes, which kind of take away tractor beams, kind of fights them off. Force beams and pressure beams, which is the opposite of tractor beams. I wonder how well those work. I didn't get to play any of those. I know how to play tractor beams to a point, but I wanted to see how the shearing planes is easy enough. It's just against the tractor beams. Then you get the energy beams, the overload dampeners, which really is the defense against the energy beams. Assault movement, which is really nice. It's actually just a few extra points of movement after everybody's done moving. You have an extra few points that you get another movement segment. So that's of course used in fighters a lot, and of course that's what's next is the fighters and hangar bays, and it goes on and on. So the tech levels are really interesting, and you can go up tech levels by research and development. It's definitely a 4X game, and as you can see, they got it just keeps on going. And here's the alien forces determination chart. If you have to figure out what the aliens have, and you can see some of these ships. And take a look at this right here where it says orbital bases. it'll say S times 20. Of course, that means shields times 20, armor times 19. When it comes to the lasers and weapons that get through a certain armor or shield, at first, it doesn't seem like it makes much sense for these smaller ships because when you're combining fire, it's going to go away anyway. But it's when you get to these big bases and big ships that getting through the shields or the armor of any one ship at a time is good. As long as you have those specialized weapons that can get through that and you have enough of them, then it becomes apparent that you're getting through the ship in half the amount of time. So it's the big ships that I think really go through that. But keep in mind, look at the bases. That's as extensive as these get for the pocket box version. I'm going to show you a picture soon of the ships, how they look like in Starfire in the later ways that almost take away kind of the simplicity of the game to a point. When you see it, it's very wild. But anyway, the game keeps on going. We got home systems here. They just some examples, and basically for 23 pages, they have a complete campaign system for your Starfire campaign, and it's pretty good. It still takes a lot of paperwork, but I mean, at the same time, I'm sure that after you get used to it, it actually becomes fun because you see how everything starts panning out, and it's kind of random, and you have your own little. This is a mix between. This is actually closer to Solar Starfire now than the Ultra Starfire, which is more. Tournament based, because this is actually more of the Solar Starfire where you're creating a narrative game, but this is really nice. But let's go on to Solar Starfire and find out how far and deep the rabbit hole goes. And just as a reminder, folks, if you've come this far in the video, there's a good chance you've liked the video. I hope so anyway. Please take a moment to smash that like and subscribe button and just let me know I'm doing a good job. I do appreciate it. Okay, as I was about to go into Solar Starfire, I did want to take a pit stop here at third edition real quick. First off, this is the place where they made those tactical changes with the dice and the half points that I was talking about. And also this is really a good segue because this is 132 pages. There is still a lot going on from the 24 pages they went before. And some people like to have stopped here. I hear people say that this is like one of their favorite versions of Starfire because they believe the new ones went maybe a bit too far. So basically, what's this one all about? Well, they start talking about mothballing units here. Let me see if I can find where those are at. Crew grade readiness states like mothballing units, crew grades. And there's all kinds of extra things. They have more about tractor beams and pressure beams here for tactics and stuff. But the real main thing that they go through detail here, in my opinion, are the tech levels. As we've seen before, they had the basic tech levels. Now they've added a few more systems. But a lot of this also, half of them are new systems, which anybody that likes space games would probably like. But also a lot of them have to do with systems that are just now more efficient. So if you had a laser, let's say in tech level 3, now in tech level 5, it costs less points and less space to put on the ship. Okay, making the ships overall more efficient. All right. And the ships can do more. But some of them also only have to do, again, with empire building, like atmospheric capability, because you do have to track how putting supplies down on a planet and taking people off and maybe even crew. I don't know how deep that goes with that. But there is a lot going on. There's about 9 tech levels overall. They have antimatter warheads and just a lot going on there. But let's see about the space armies here. Here's the ships for some sample armies, and we could see already that at third edition Starfire, this is a complete line right here. So they actually have 2 lines now, and as you can see, they get pretty complicated. To a point where if I had a number of weapons, I wouldn't know what weapons are actually on this. And to check that out every time, I would almost imagine it would have been a good idea to actually have something above the line saying how many weapons you have of a certain type. It's kind of like at the beginning here, how they actually streamline shields and armor, how they say S times 11 rather than just 11 S's, right? I almost think they should do that to the weapons too. And that even it gets really intimidating. I think I would get lost in that in the game and I would miss weapon fire opportunities because I wouldn't know what my ships actually had. But that's where they went with that. So let's go on to Solar Starfire. All right, so I'm going to try to give Solar Starfire some justice here. Obviously, with 429 pages, this is a lot to go through. I don't see how anybody could play this game without a spreadsheet, which they give you on the, when you go directly through Starfire Design Studio. I don't know if you get that at War Game Vault when you get those editions or not, but you definitely get it when you go direct through Starfire Design Studios. So the combat system seems a bit the same. There are a few differences, like they talk about rate of fire. Maybe they talked about in third edition too. But that definitely, because of the detail level that's in this, there's a lot more going on with combat to a point. But it starts on page 45 and ends on page 67 when the system rules start to begin. So it seems to be, for all and most part, for me, leaping through it, the same combat game. Okay. Of course, let's give you an idea of how deeper they go. Talking about readiness and personnel. Remember on third edition, we were talking about the mothballed ships and stuff. Well, now they add things like general quarters, exhausted crews, exhausted pilots, and even surprise attacks as well. So, and there's probably a few more things that I didn't notice right off the bat. But already you can see how, if that's expanding upon that from third edition, everything's expanded on from third edition here on out. So designing units, let me see if I can find some populations and infrastructure. So we were talking about population units before. Now they're giving gross empire values, gross planetary values, and the income and wealth. And believe me, these are all modified by everything that you did. You find out about the planets, because there's a chart. I can't find it. I don't want to try to find it now. That said about the environment. Before try to get the atmosphere, and we've seen that all in the pocket version. They said the atmosphere would change. Well, now they're talking about harsh environments or lush environments. I mean, all kinds of things. I mean, they are going deep into the detail of your worlds, okay? And this affects everything. And I want to point out again that you are making a chart like somewhat like this. They don't give you a chart. They probably make you make up your own here. But after a while, it doesn't. This may not sound that big of a deal when you're only dealing with one planet, but you're dealing with all these planets after you start getting going on your galaxy, right? That's the point of the whole thing. There's just so many moving parts going on. I don't see how anybody. I would imagine even with spreadsheets, it would be a real something else to deal with. I want to see, here we got research and development. And what's interesting here is they start talking about, you've heard about tech trees. Of course, they go one further and they talk about branches and twigs and how they differ, and even knots, which are like a holdup, which you have to come up with a breakthrough before you can go on to these branches. It's just like you got to figure this out before you can go through any of that. Now, you may think that that's what you can do with tech trees already, but I guess these hold you up a little bit more in some certain way. They do talk about intelligence gathering in this a lot more, because there's a strategic part of the game, and then you also you can even be in the same system, I believe, if I read that correctly. They have galactic movement, then they have movement within a system. You still could have enemy forces there. You still have to detect them, and then there's a tactical version of combat. There's just so much going on. And then let's take a look at processing monthly turns. Where's that part at that talked about here we are, strategic components. Here's a turn. Here's a strategic turn. You got, looking on the right hand side here, you got the economic phase. You're going to figure out population growth, calculate the revenue, transfer freighters, which is a big thing. They got to come down. They have to have atmospheric capability. And remember, you're building these ships and you're changing them all the time because you have new tech available to you. It's bigger than the pocket box version. Obviously, pocket box version, you're just going to be, it's going to be pretty basic. Here, you got to figure out everything here. You got to make required maintenance payments, and then record changes to the economic potential. Then you go on to, you got to pay political officers. Then you have the information phase, where you have overt intelligence, covert intelligence, monthly activities like receive your new military units, write movement orders for all your military units across the entire galaxy. Can you imagine how long it takes a turn in this game? system triggers and tactical combats. That's, I guess, where you move over to the game, the actual fighting game. Then you got the political phases. You check for rebellion of conquered planets and resolve any results. Then you have planetary invasion roles. Thank God it looks like, I didn't check into it, but it looks like they just say, okay, if you're invading a planet, you bring your forces. I guess you have to have standard troop ships come through, and then the number of them that actually make it through, you roll a die and say they just cover combat in one roll, which is kind of wild when you have a game that goes this deep. You would almost think it's like, you know what, we've gone this far. Let's figure out every planetary invasion. That would be probably too much, which is kind of funny for a game like this to say. But then you got the record keeping phase, which is kind of a funny name for a phase that it seems like we've been doing record keeping the entire time. But you get unit losses due to combat, population losses, and so on and so on. Okay, I think you get the idea. But there's a lot going on there. So let me get to I want to show you some of the examples of what ships look like now. Look at the upper left in between right here, the Columbia class destroyer here. So now ships can be even up to 4 lines, and just look at that thing. Now PV is point value, I guess. They actually figure out a combat value, or is it a point value or is it a combat value? That's two different things. Point value in the overall strategic part of the game, but then ships should have a combat value, because some things just aren't combat. A freighter is going to might be worth something, but it's going to be different than in combat. But as you can see here, things get a lot more detailed and technical. And they say below it, here's a simplified control sheet. Suggested format for combat records. So so it goes down to 2 lines there. So that's interesting. I don't know what any of that stuff on the top means. It's really deep there. So that's pretty interesting. And I guess they go through it right here. And then they actually have an optional rules section like galactic oddities and stuff and ancient artifacts, which is kind of funny. In a way you would think, why would they say optional rules for a game that's already so deep? Why not just use them? But I guess this is more along the lines of, do you want a strict galactic game of hard science fiction, or do you want to do the ancient artifacts and kind of more of a mystical game and allow that in? So pretty interesting ideas right there. Okay, so to summarize about Starfire, it's kind of, I have a duality as far as what I think about it. Now, obviously, the Starfire system itself, I absolutely love the combat system. There's no doubt about it. Okay, I love what they did in 3rd edition. They changed from 2d6 to d10, and they got rid of the half hits. I am implementing those changes in my Starfire games. There's no doubt. And I do believe the game is simple enough to be tweakable. One of the things that came through my mind that I would like to see is maybe shields on front and back. Not going like 6 different sides like Starfleet Battles, but I think front and back would add a little bit of extra flavor to the game and keep it simple. I wouldn't go further than to have maybe 2 lines. I know everything's on 1 line. I would go to maybe 2 lines, only to have the name of the ship, the number of weapons that are on the ship, so you can see easily how many weapons are left of any one thing, because some of those lines can get pretty big. And then you have the turn ratio and the speed of the ship. That would be forgivable and still very simple, and that would actually streamline combat even further, I would believe. Now, when it really comes down to the game, and another thing is respect to them to keeping the game simple, even in the newer editions. You see the 400 pages, you're probably going to think it's going to be overwhelming. It's actually the same system it always has been, with maybe a few extra things that have to do with their system building. Okay, but overall, the game has been the same. Okay. Now, it's the perplexing part is really the empires part. And yeah, they have everything available, so you can get the empires that you want, of the complexity you want. They were kind of wise in that. I would definitely go with the Starfire 3 empires if I was going to play anything. Keep it as simple as possible. And even then, there's probably things I might want to tweak out of that. Just play some basic games. Now, when you get to the 3rd edition, there might be a few things I like. But when it comes to the 5th edition, Ultra Starfire and Ultra Starfire, did I say Ultra Starfire? Solar Starfire and Ultra Starfire. I think that gets a little bit confusing. First off, there's 2 different products of almost the same thing, and they're charging $50 a piece for them. And here's the funny thing, marketing wise. Now, I don't know. I'm sure their motivation is not monetary. okay, in these games. They're doing it for the love of the game, okay? But at the same time, resources matter, and getting people into the game matter, and for what they're making on Solar Starfire and Ultra Starfire, my thought is they could be making just as much as if they were to come out with just Starfire combat rules and then maybe another supplement, a simple 24-page supplement for Starfire 3 Empires. Just re release that into a nice, pretty version. I believe they could absolutely do that. And then from those people that get into that, they can go down the rabbit hole to see how far down they want to go. And that means that Starfire 3rd edition could be advanced Starfire Empires, and then they have tournament Starfire, and then they could have, I don't know what you'd call narrative Starfire, but it really, as a marketer, I think you should spell it out rather than saying Solar Starfire. That's kind of like, what is that, right? So I would say definitely storyline Starfire. I don't know, but you definitely have to spell it out when it comes to marketing. And they could have multiple products that way and say, hey, maybe even 3rd edition might be good for some of you guys. Depending on what far you want to go. I guess the part is that it really comes down to the fan base. Is everybody in playing 5th edition Starfire? Are they really playing those? So I don't know. But I would think that if you really want to get more people into the game, simplicity is the way to go. Have those available, but really make the push on these products or a new version of these products, and they would be even doing even better and have a lot of people enjoy this great game. So overall, guys, I really think you should get Starfire. Start off with the basic pocket editions that you can get either on the War Game Vault, or you can get them from Starfire Design Studios direct through their Legacy downloads. And that is the video for Starfire, and I'll see you next video.